A lot of activity taking place in Cuba. If you've been with the show this week, you remember that we talked about this on Monday. I took you around a photographic journey of my trip down to Cuba, and we had a great time down there learning about the people and learning about the culture. And my takeaway from that trip was that there are a lot of capitalists down there, right? I showed you the experience with the car repair center. We went to various restaurants where these Cuban people would actually sort of have to kind of, bootleg a restaurant so that you'd have to kind of sneak in the back and they would serve you without the government really knowing, because that's kind of capitalist. And so there's all these different little cultural lessons that I learned when I went down there. So I've been paying close attention to this. And we know that there were some protests that have sort of been percolating over the last few days. And we talked about this on Monday. When the protest first broke, Joe Biden came out with the statement, said something like, well, we support free people and democracy all around the world, whatever, kind of thinking that this thing might just kind of go by the wayside. Well, that didn't happen. We fast forward to today, a couple days later, and now the Biden administration is getting a lot of grief. A lot of people are saying, hey, we need more than that. We need more than a statement from you, okay? This is an actual revolution that's taking place. If you know anything about the history between the United States and Cuba, we have a little bit of baggage going on in this relationship. We had the Cuban Missile Crisis. This has sort of been a stake that has been planted in the Western Hemisphere that is sort of lingering communism that's a relic from the old Cold War. Remember when the Russians or the Soviet Union back then was shipping over missiles to Cuba and sort of building this, JFK was in office, and the whole thing could have been the end of mankind as we know it. So it is a very important geographical location, a lot of history there. And now, in my opinion, it's one of the most important things that could be happening geopolitically related to America, right? It's 90 miles south of Florida. So you can get on hop on a raft and sort of sail across the ocean to get to the United States. It's a very close neighbor, and we should be paying attention to it. The reason why a lot more people are sort of, raising their eyebrows about this thing is because they're starting to say that the situation is so bad that there needs to be military intervention. The United States needs to take some action and go down there and help the capitalists, help the people wanting democracy in this totalitarian communist regime, right? If the military is going to be doing anything out there, if America is, supposed to be this entity that spreads freedom and democracy throughout the world, you can't really find a worse place than Cuba to go, right? I mean, it really is kind of the best option. It's right around the corner, and it's filled with a communist tyrannical government. So now what we're seeing is people from Cuba are responding, and they're saying we need some stronger action. So in fact, Breitbart did some very good reporting on this. Nobody else is talking about this. I went over to the New York Times. I went over to CNN today. I had screenshots, but I'm not going to play those. They're blurbs on their website about it. On CNN.com, it's like at the bottom. It's barely above the fold. Nobody's talking about it. So Breitbart, they did some good stuff on this. A series of tepid and inaccurate statements from President Joe and his administration are meeting growing calls this week for the American government to act to prevent further loss of life. So we talked about this. Protests took place in the streets, suggest as many as 60 cities and towns rose up demanding an end to communism. And so we're going to see this back and forth, right, characterizing this thing. Are they mad about vaccines? Are they mad about climate change? Are they mad about healthcare, which I thought was perfect because Michael Moore told us so? Or are they mad about something else like communism? If you are a communist sympathizer, of course, the first thing you're going to say, oh, it's not communism at all. Communism is perfect. And this has to be about other things like medical supplies and things like that. So you're going to see this dichotomy, this back and forth, the tension between the two sides going on as this revolution or whatever we're calling it continues. The protests were a culmination of nearly 2 decades of organized dissident action started back in spring 2003. Last major violent crackdown, protesters chanted freedom and other anti-communist slogans, making clear their demands to end the 62-year-old Castro regime. And then we had the Communist Party here, the Cuban Communist Party. They responded. They're not going to take this lying down. They issued an order of combat. Literally here, you can see underlined, an order of combat. What does that do? It commands all communist loyalists to take to the streets and violently assault the peaceful protesters. It's also a shutdown for the internet for as much of this week, making international reporting on the matter extremely difficult. The little information the Cubans have managed to get out of the island indicates that the protests have continued daily since Sunday, despite widespread reports of police gang beatings, assassinations, and deadly door-to-door raids. So, I mean, it's like an actual war zone down there, right? You have the Communist Party who said this, that there is la orden de combate está dada a la calle los revolucionarios, right? Now, my Spanish is butchered, a very, very white Scottsdale Spanish version of that. But what if you translate this, what you'll see is it says the order of combat is given. The revolutionaries take to the streets. This is what the Cuban leader Miguel Diaz-Canel said to the Cuban people. He gave an address on Sunday, called for a civil war on the island, right? A civil war on the island. In his speech, he called on communists to take to the streets from now on and in the coming days. The ruler called for a civil war on the island on Sunday. And so, a lot of this stuff is slowly trickling out. A lot of our media just isn't covering it. I went to the Washington Post, tiny blurb, CNN, tiny blurb. New York Times, I don't even think it was above the fold. So nobody wants to talk. Even Fox News was really sort of, lacking on it. I went over there and checked them out, and they had a little bit of a, to be fair, their link was above the fold at least. But most people are talking about coronavirus and the Delta variant and, vaccination rates and all of that. I mean, if you want to know what they want you to be doing and thinking and reading, just go to those three websites. Just go to CNN, Fox News, Washington Post, add in the New York Times if you want four of them. And you can just see if they're all in alignment, if they're all talking about the same thing, well, that means that that you're getting terrible information, right? Because they're all in alignment. And so nobody's doing any actually reporting. They're all just copy and pasting each other's articles. So we have to, unfortunately, go around the world to other parts like Medio.com, where they're actually talking about what's happening there. So we know it's basically a war zone down there. And when I first started to think about this in terms of political, posturing, I was remembering some of the other stories that we've talked about relating to immigration, relating to the border, relating to the sort of, surge of people coming across the southern border, and the Biden administration and Kamala Harris attempting to go and solve this problem, right? Biden said, hey, you're very good, Miss Kamala, so you can go down there and solve this. You're very smart. Here, this is your problem. Enjoy this debacle that we're going to slide across the table to you. And so she didn't want to do anything with that. So she says, no, we're going to address the root causes. She goes down to Guatemala, then over to Mexico, and doesn't really address any of the root causes at all. Just kind of blames climate change and other root causes. Okay, so that was all going on. And, a lot of people now, we're going to be seeing some interesting conversations here as they relate to immigration. So some people might have been saying, well, any of the southern border problems, we have this surge of people coming across the border and we need to clamp down on immigration, and immigration's bad and we don't want, this sort of a surge of people coming across the border. But then a lot of those same people are saying, yeah, but we have to help the Cubans. And you're going, well, that's weird. So if you're saying that sort of one country, their individuals cannot come into the United States, but another country, their people can, Cuba can, well, what's going on here? Do you like, one demographic better than the other, one ethnicity better than the other? What's the problem here? And so you've got an easy ability to start to sort of draw out some contradictions, especially from people on the right side of the aisle. And so I start to think, well, how do you reconcile those differences? How do you sort of, mash those things together? And I actually don't think that they're inconsistent at all, really. I mean, I think that there's a group of people who have not really been opposed to immigration in general, been sort of opposed to the mechanisms by which it's being implemented and some of the policies that have been created in order to cause the surge of people rushing across the southern border. But it has nothing to do with the people, right? People aren't upset about the actual people. In fact, I've been very kind of consistent here that I think that what they are doing by changing these policies in the sake of humanitarian saving is actually causing a humanitarian crisis. So their very good intentions are great, but they're causing some serious consequences. And so that is a problem. But so then how do you sort of, connect all of these things together? And I think there's always been a lot of room for legal immigration, and there's always been sort of an acceptance of by the American people for political refugees, right? It's for people who are fleeing communism or fleeing totalitarianism. America has always sort of embraced the idea that we're welcome for that, right? Countries sort of burst out of that. Bunch of founding fathers and mothers and sisters and brothers all came across the Atlantic and said, we're refugees, we're political refugees. What's happening in our home state is garbage, and so we want to go form a new world. And so that has always, I think, sort of been ingrained in the aura of America, right? We've got, the Statue of Liberty and people on, coming across the island, looking up to Lady Liberty. And it's a powerful thing here. So if we're talking about the Cubans and they are fleeing a communist totalitarian dictatorship, you kind of might think that those would be the ideal people that you would want to accept into the country, right? It's people that appreciate freedom, appreciate liberty, and they want to be a part of the American ideal, not just because they want a better life, but because they're literally escaping execution, theoretically. And so we've got a lot of issues to dissect there, but it is an important question for the current administration to be grappling with, right? What happens if you're a Cuban person, you're a capitalist, you're somebody who doesn't like the Castro regime? In other words, you're an ally of America. What do we do with you? If you want to come to the country, to the United States, what do we do? Do we intervene? Do we allow you to come in? Do we expedite your transition out of the country? Do we send resources over there, support? What do we do? Well, Biden administration, they're going to tell us what they intend to do. So here is the Homeland Security Secretary. His name is Mayorkas. Oh, hang on one second. I've got to change something over here. All right, let's see if that plays.
Allow me to be clear. If you take to the sea, you will not come to the United States. The time is never right to attempt migration by sea. To those who risk their lives doing so, this risk is not worth taking. Again, I repeat, do not risk your life attempting to enter the United States illegally. You will not come to the United States.
Okay, so that's another little bit of an administration change, isn't it? Just like I was saying, well, some of the conservatives might have a little bit of a contradiction to reconcile there, maybe saying we don't want immigration from certain countries, but it may be okay from other countries. The Biden administration has a little bit of a contradiction there too, right? Because we heard for a long time, at least until very recently, that everybody's welcome here and that anybody who doesn't say that you're welcome in America is a racist and a bigot and somebody who is a xenophobic monster who needs to be eliminated from office. Mayorkas and many people in the Biden administration, that was their characterization of Trump and all of the hardline immigration policies. So during the campaign and very recently, up until we started to recognize that they have lost total control of the southern border, did their language start to change a little bit. And now it's this don't come. Right now it's Kamala Harris going down to Guatemala, wagging her finger in their faces saying don't come. But their policies don't match. So the contradiction here, of course, is that Kamala Harris will go down to one group of let's say, Southern American countries, and she'll tell them certain things, but the policies at the border don't actually reflect any of that. So she says don't come, but meanwhile, the Wait in Mexico program that Donald Trump implemented is still gone with the wind, and they're still allowed to sort of immigrate into the country. We got massive surges, Border Patrol saying it's basically a catastrophic failure across the board, and we see numbers that are so much greater than anything we've seen historically that it is in fact a pretty big crisis. So they are not changing their policies to stop that version of immigration. They're okay with that continuing to happen. Otherwise, they would change the policies, one would presume. But they are not willing to allow unbridled, just unfettered immigration from Cuba. Why is that? That's very, very strange. Why is it okay from some countries and not other countries? Right? Both sides are going to have to be asking themselves that question today. And I would be curious to know what the answers are. We have Jenn Psaki, of course, over at the White House. It's a difficult balancing act that you have to do when you're sort of sympathetic to socialism, big government, communism, from a philosophical perspective, right? The idea of central planning, the idea that the government should have more control from a fundamental level, right? I think what the Democratic Party and the Republican Party too, quite frankly, right? I'm tired of hearing this idea that the Republicans or the conservative party are small government. That died a long time ago. In fact, in my entire life, I've been hearing that my entire life, and I have never one time seen a government shrink under a conservative. Never, not once, right? And I was a boy when Reagan was in office, but I don't think that happened there either, right? I think the government has kind of always been getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And so now we're talking about sort of, big government and big government light, but we're both trending towards the direction of more government control, more government ability to decide what you do with your life, where you go, who you talk to, based on a lot of the social controls that have been implemented and trickling down over the last 18 months or so. So we're seeing a situation now where it's very difficult for an administration that has some political alignment with a foreign government blaming something that they have in common, which of course is communism. And I'm not calling the Biden administration communist, right? They're not there yet, but maybe they'll get there soon. Here is Jenn Psaki, who is answering a sort of a poorly worded question. I'm not sure who this reporter is, but he's trying to say, hey, can you call this a protest against communism, essentially? Can you just come out and say it one time? Can anybody? Let's listen.
Was reiterating is that this is not the time to travel irregularly. It's dangerous. People can lose their lives as they have in the past.
And as the administration tries to figure out the root causes of migration to the country, don't we know that the reason people want to leave Cuba is because they don't like communism? And so as you're trying to figure out like what the processes are for these people who want to leave Cuba,
I'm not sure what your question is.
You guys.
Why are people leaving Cuba, or what is the process for them getting here? I can explain either of them, but you tell me.
Sure, yeah. Do you think that people are leaving Cuba because they don't like communism?
I think we've been pretty clear that we think people are leaving Cuba, or not leaving Cuba, or protesting in the streets as well, because they are opposed to the oppression, to the mismanagement of the government in the country. And we certainly support their rights of protest. We support their efforts to speak out against their treatment in Cuba.
All right, so communism, mismanagement, they kind of are two sides of the same coin, right? I mean, isn't it? The idea of communism is that you have a central alliance, you have a central organization that can sort of, move from each according to their ability to each according to their needs, and kind of be this centralized exchange of all the resources in society so that things are more egalitarian. You don't have guys like Bezos going up into space. Apparently, that's how they're going to solve the problem. So it necessarily involves mismanagement, because that's not possible to do, right? They try to do this. To micromanage everything in everybody's lives never works. So that's the White House. That's going to be their framing on this for the foreseeable future. Meanwhile, we've got a lot of Cuban people who are not happy about this. And in fact, they were so upset that they closed down one of the expressways in Miami, and they blame Biden for a lack of support, right? So the Cuban American protesters, they shut it down. Hundreds of Cuban American protesters blocked a major expressway in Miami on Tuesday, demanding that Biden do more. We need Biden's support, one man said. So we are trying to fight to finish with the communism. Right there it is. Heavy rains did not stop the many who turned police away when they reached the highway. The crowd chanted SOS Cuba. Anti-government protests broke out. 100 demonstrators have been detained down there in Cuba. Here's a quick highlight of some of the people who were down there in Miami talking about what's going on.
Freedom Cuba. SOS Cuba, Biden.
We need Biden support. That we have not the support from the president. So we are trying to fight to finish with the communism.
Biden, you should listen to the people here, the elected officials that are Cubans and know what's best for the people in Cuba. So just hear us out and let's try to come together to see what we can do.
All right. So hear us out, right? They're down there, they're protesting, and they're saying, listen to the local politicians. They're saying things like libertad. They're saying things like we want to end the communism, right? This is a political shift. It's not mismanagement. It's something bigger happening, and this has been in the making for 60 years, for like 6 decades. And you'd expect a little bit more activity, I would think, on this, unless it's politically not useful for your party. So we just heard from the young lady saying, hey, let's listen to the local politicians, the people who were down here. Come on, Biden, listen to us. Here is Mayor Suarez over from Miami. And I've seen this guy before. Actually, this guy was very involved in the last Bitcoin conference. And so Miami's doing very interesting things with crypto. And with, decentralization, which is the big reason I'm interested in crypto, is because it is sort of censorship resistant. It is decentralized. There's really no one, organization that can control a lot of it. And people would debate that point, but I like where it's trending. Mayor Suarez of Miami hosted the Bitcoin conference and said, listen, we're going to be pushing all sorts of reforms to bring some of the crypto mines to Miami. And it might be the sort of the he called it something great. Something like, he doesn't want, he wants Miami to be the new crypto valley, sort of referencing Silicon Valley, right? So a lot of interesting things happening there. And let's listen in and see what he has to say. Very, very interesting interview here with Fox.
No, I don't think the embargo is cruel at all. And I think that the Cuban people are not asking for a lifting of the embargo. They're going out in the streets every single day talking about the failure of the communist regime to provide for its people. And I don't understand why that's so difficult for people to understand. It has failed for 6 decades. And what should be being contemplated right now is a coalition, a potential military action in Cuba, similar to what has happened in both administrations, in both Republican and Democrat administrations. In Republican with Bush in Panama, they deposed Noriega, and that country had peaceful democracy for decades. And you had interventions by Democratic presidents, taking out Osama bin Laden in Pakistan. It's a sovereign country where they took out a terrorist that probably saved thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of lives, and President Clinton in Kosovo intervening in a humanitarian issue with airstrikes. So there have been many, many opportunities in the history.
Are you suggesting airstrikes in Cuba?
What I'm suggesting is that option is one that has to be explored and cannot be just simply discarded as an option that is not on the table. And there's a variety of ways the military can do it, but that's something that needs to be discussed and needs to be looked at as a potential option, in addition to a variety of other options that can be discussed.
So your first thought, right? Of course, anytime you hear military intervention, at least mine was, another one? Like, we're going to be, what are we going to go down there for, another 40 years? What, like we're just trying to finish up a couple of the last ones we were involved in. Can we maybe not start another, international conflict? But at the same time, he makes some pretty good points, doesn't he? Right? The Democrats do this, the Republicans do that. If they are, if part of what America does, like if that's what as a country we decide we want to do, is go around and sort of prop up democracy around the world. You can debate that. That's a whole separate point. But his point is valid, right? A lot of people say, "Oh no, we're not going to go down there and help the Cubans at all." And he goes, "Well, why the hell not? What are you, nuts? We went over to the Middle East and helped them. We went into Pakistan and we got Joe Biden under another administration. So don't tell me that we don't do military intervention for certain interests. We do it all the time. And why shouldn't the Cuban people get the benefit of that?" And I think that's a very good point, right? If there's going to be a situation where there is a country that is communist, that's going to be on the verge of a democratic country that has a lot of amazing people down there, that's right across the pond from us, and that has a lot of opportunity economically for their people, for the American people, for the Western Hemisphere, for the world, why wouldn't we go and do that, right? Why is it only that we go into countries where they don't want us, for example? Why do we go plop down in Iraq where we have to fight the entire country and the entire region for 40 years, for 20 years, right? For however long it takes, or Afghanistan or any of these other places. It sounds like the Cuban people are demonstrating they want the Cuban regime, the Castro regime, thrown out of there, and America is capable and willing to do that. So, why wouldn't you have that conversation? If America has already decided that we're going to be this nation-building police force of the world, well, why are the Cubans excluded from that? It's not quite fair, is it? And maybe, if we're going to be, fighting for the Middle East, or we're going to be, dumping all of this money to, all of our allies around the world, why can't we step in here? Doesn't make that much sense, I think, is what the mayor is saying, right? And I think it's a valid point. Now, this momentum is not just with Mayor Suarez. It's not just with conservative Republicans. Here's a state senator from Pennsylvania. In fact, his name is Brian Stack, and he's out there saying, yeah, we got to do something to help these poor people. Here he is.
You asked about military intervention. Can you talk about that?
Yes. I believe the United States should have been there years ago. Just like we've liberated other countries, we should liberate Cuba, make that country free for the Cuban people, stop all the politics all around, talking about it. It takes action. Liberate the country and give the country back to the Cuban people and stop this abuse upon the Cubans.
Right. So that's a Democrat. And there are some consequences of inaction, as Marco Rubio is going to tell us about. So he calls for Biden to plan on the Russians arriving. Says 1,000 special forces are coming. He said on Wednesday that he better prepare a plan for taking action in Cuba. He raised the prospect of Russian military intervention, which, as we know, Joe Biden warned Putin. So maybe this will get him in gear. He says, Rubio said, these guys talk about diplomacy's back, America's back, Rubio said in an interview. He said, great, do me a favor, convene the United States Security Council, convene the Organization of American States, and use your diplomatic heft. The fact that America is back, go to all these countries and say, okay, guys, we have a massacre about to happen 90 miles from our shores. We want the international community to condemn it, isolate it, and be prepared to take action. And so what he's saying is that, if you read the rest of the article, there is going to be a power vacuum there, right? You're going to have two different sides. Very interesting things are happening there. What article was it? Oh, I think the Breitbart article that we're going to finish up with next has a lot of good details about what's happening there. But they're dividing the island into different precincts, and the Communist Party is reporting which precincts they control and what party controls or what precincts they don't control. And so you're seeing divisions take place that might ultimately result in a civil war. And if one side, let's say the side of communism, decides that or starts losing the battle, well, you're going to see some reinforcements come in, right? And this could be a small proxy war, very much analogous to what we went through back in the 1960s, I think it was, with the Cuban Missile Crisis when JFK was in office. So it is a big deal, and it's not something that people can just paper over, because even though America may not want to deal with it, the Russians may say this is a great foothold. They're calling for help. The Americans are asleep at the wheel. We have Dementia Joe in the White House, gone with the wind. So we're just going to slide on in there and take full advantage. That's what Rubio's warning about. And there's a final paragraph I wanted to share from the Breitbart article before we get into the chat over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Says what such an intervention would look like if the U.S. got involved is up to much speculation and a lot of debate. There's an organization called the Assembly of the Cuban Resistance, which is a coalition of dissident organizations. They published a 5-point plan to liberate Cuba. Let's see what's in it. Number one, the termination of the regime is non-negotiable. Castro's gotta go. All those involved in the peaceful civic protest must stay out in the streets and maintain their commitment to a free Cuba. All national police and armed forces must support the citizens and uphold their duty to their country and not the communist regime. International intervention led by the United States in order to prevent a bloodbath. They're calling for help. The immediate cessation of all tourism to Cuba until the dictatorship has been dismantled. So speaking to Breitbart News, because they're actually reporting on this, they got a statement from Orlando Gutierrez Boronat. He's the director of the Assembly. He listed military intervention as one of the factors in a greater plan for the U.S. government to properly aid Cuba. Cuban activists, he noted, must push for a decisive and international intervention led by the U.S. to protect the Cuban people and isolate and end the communist regime. So what's the U.S. going to do? Well, probably nothing. So let's take a look at some of the questions over from watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Let's see what's going on in the chat. We've got a lot of activity going on. Pinky 2's in the house. Good to see you. Ryan's here. And we've got Want to Know and others. Let's see what's coming in from the questions. So we have the first one here is from Gina, Wide Awake, saying, we all know that the Biden administration are low-key commies, but I'm still disgusted by my Dorcas. Which is great. Announcement to the Cuban people saying not to come by sea. How are they supposed to get out of there? It's not like they can walk to Florida or fly a plane. Well, that's the point, really, is he doesn't want them to come, right? He's saying, don't come. So I think that's the point, right? He's no planes, no boats, no walking, nothing. You're stuck there. Let's see who's next. We've got Thunder7 who said, Rob, Obama took Cuba off the list of terrorist state countries and Trump put them back. Now, Jim Acosta, the most dishonest of the fake news celebrities, is begging Biden to do something. Wow. His dad fled Cuba and now he cares about people leaving under communist rule. Hope this wakes him up that the Biden Marxist regime is heading down the same terrorist state path. Hypocrisy, thy name is Democrat. Wow, that's interesting about Jim Acosta. It's kind of wild when people can't see that. I was listening to this really fascinating interview the other day, last night actually. Jordan Peterson was talking to this physicist, and the guy was like beyond brilliant. I can't remember his name. It was one of his most recent interviews, about 2 hours. And the guy was like a PhD physicist from MIT, went to Harvard, went to all of these things. And he's talking about how the universe is all random. Everything's 100% random. And he goes in and he makes very good arguments. Well, this happened and life is this thing. And, we all think that life is very profound, but it's kind of not, because if you put it on a time scale of 13.8 billion years, you're going to have a lot more of those that come and go, and you'll never even know about it, right? And all these things. And he kept talking about the sort of the amazingness of the coincidence over and over. It's incredible that this happened. Like, it's amazing, and it's amazing, it's amazing. And the whole time I'm thinking, hello, my friend. That's exactly what the intelligent designers say, right? It's so incredible that it had to sort of come from something. And so, people will take the same issue. He's looking at all this randomness and saying, oh, this is just a pure accident. Other people will look at the same series of randomness and say, well, it's so coincidental. It's almost beautifully designed. And so you'll see the same thing, right? You've got Jim Acosta, who is basically a communist, largely, who is now upset about communism and communist rule, right? He's working for CNN. He wants massive government oversight of everything. He wants the government to tell you what to do, where to go, who you can hang out with, how long to stay indoors and outdoors, and what to put in your body. And so now he's saying, well, this is a problem. We have to help the Cuban people, not recognizing that he's the person in the kitchen who's turning the heat up on the frog in the boiling water. Good comment there, Thunder7. Let's see who else. We've got Go Navy says, amazing how the Biden regime welcomes everyone except the Cubans, because, of course, the Cubans voted for President Trump. There it is. So I was waiting to see if there would be an explanation for the differential there, right? Why does one segment of South American countries get to come in, or Central American countries get to come into the United States, but not the other one? And it's interesting because I mentioned previously that there are a lot of capitalists in Cuba. So maybe that's the reason. All right. What else? We've got Want to Know says, what happened to Bernie saying Cuba was a great example of healthcare? Kind of quiet lately. Yeah, that's a good point. We've got next up, we have Want to Know says, I watch Fox early in the morning. The main people talking about Cuba and elections a lot. The riot in Africa are bad, and the border crossing. So Fox is talking about it. Sharon is here, says, why would the current U.S. regime oppose the Cuban Communist regime? After all, the current U.S. regime is communist, or at the very least, very communist friendly, right? Which is the point, is they're not going to do anything that would make it easier for people to sort of escape the regime, would they? We have Sharon also says their policy towards the Cubans trying to enter illegally has nothing to do with the border crisis. They will not support an anti-communist uprising. Yeah, right, because I think they would be more in alignment with freedom and more freedom-oriented ideals, and that doesn't necessarily help their party. Rob, great coverage of the Cuba situation coming from Thunder7, says, by the way, Cubans vote Republican, so that's why the Dems don't want them here. Oh, that's terrible. So if you're Republican, we actually prefer you just die in Cuba. So good luck out there. Maybe if you voted left, we'd invite you over. Joe Snow says, Rob, it's now being referred to as the Uniparty. They are neither Dems or the Republicans anymore. They're all part of the same team. I agree with that. I've been saying this for a long time. The Republicans go in there and they just ransack the Treasury. Then they do it for a few years and they just say, oh, we're done now. We're full. You can go Democrats, because if we keep eating, they're going to be mad at us. So it's your turn now. The Democrats go in, they clear it out. And then they don't want to get in trouble with the American people. So all right, we're done. It's your turn now. The Republicans come back in. All a bunch of just awful politicians. Okay, next we've got Sharon says, off topic, but I'm having a problem with your form. I can't see the whole text, just a few words, so I have to type the question on a sticky note and copy and paste it. Okay, so I know why that is, Sharon. I can answer that. Is because I actually shrunk the form box to make it smaller because people were sending like paragraphs. So I can actually increase that size a little bit, and I'll go ahead and do that after the show. Apologies for that. So that is a problem. I don't want you to have to copy and paste. That's a pain in the A, and we're not gonna allow that here, Sharon. Not gonna let that happen. We have Lavoisier. Lavoisier. I saw Lavoisier sign up very recently. Welcome to the community there. Says, isn't Mayorkas Cuban? I'm pretty sure his family fled Cuba to Florida. Strange he's telling Cubans to stay home. It is interesting. Why? Why is this a theme? Right? Didn't Barack Obama do that with his brother? He's like, good luck, Malik, right? No, that was his daughter. What's his name? He's hilarious. He's on Twitter. And then AOC did that with her abuela. And so now Mayorkas is doing that with his grandma or something. All right. So I don't know. I don't know why that is. Jeremy Matrita is in the house, said, Rob, the recommendation you made yesterday referring to when being faced with difficult situations, you said you always chose to take the difficult path because there is usually a reward or opportunity to grow. Wow. I was facing a decision on whether to attend a difficult training next month, and your words of encouragement spoke to me. I pulled the trigger, committed to the paid training before I could back out of it, and I finally went to the gym today. That's from Jeremy Matrita. Jeremy, that makes me so happy, man. I'm like smiling so big inside right now, and you can see it on my face. It really makes me happy that you're doing that. It's such a cool thing. You know, training is so important. It has been, I tell people this all the time, it's the secret weapon. I tell them, I say, hey, this is our secret weapon. Training, coaching, a lot of learning, continual education. Just because you're 30 something years old doesn't mean you're done learning anything. And you got to, treat it the same way you did in college or high school. You got to go learn. Paid training is very good. As long as you go and you sort of get some good stuff out of it. The gym is super. Jeremy, I'm super happy for you, man. Thank you for sharing that. This is it's comments like these that really make me just energized to do this work, because man, all right, I'm going to get emotional. I'm going to stop talking about it. I've had people who've done things like that to me, right? They've said something to me, and it has been so profound. It's changed my entire life, my entire worldview. And if I can pay that forward in a tiny, small little way, it's worth it all. So I'm super proud of you, man. I mean that from the bottom of my heart. Congratulations. Have an awesome trip. Stay in the gym. Good stuff. All right, let's continue on. We've got Wide Awake here is saying, look at Psaki's face when he said the root cause is communism. I know they don't like it. They don't want to talk about that word. It's a bad word. Sharon says, I'm absolutely shocked that Jenny didn't blame climate change for the Cuban uprising, right? I think that's Kamala's shtick. TOS Forever says, wow, why don't we see in Miami fires, looting? Is this a peaceful protest? Yeah, it's true. Yeah, right. They're not even torching any Wendy's or used car lots. So I guess that's peaceful. We have Sharon says, we've had a communist takeover of this country. It's surprising this regime doesn't send military to help the Cuban Communist government suppress the insurrectionists. It's true, right? They should, well, that's a complicated question there, right? Because, yeah, I guess it's right. They probably should throw them in isolation with Jacob Chansley. You're right. It's a good point. Medical Edward is here, says, when are you running for POTUS? Please run. I don't think I've got the stomach for politics. I really wanted to do that at some point. I sort of had that on my list, like, I'll run for office when I'm 50, and go change things. I just don't know. I don't know that I've got the stomach for it. All right, let's see what else is going on. We've got Osak says, Rob, what do you think happened in the Bay of Pigs? Does it have any influence on the current issues in Cuba? Yeah, I would say that's 60 years of complicated foreign policy and, sanctions, embargoes, intelligence operations back and forth. I think we had some diplomats down there that were getting electromagnetic shocked recently. I mean, there's been an ongoing battle with Cuba for a long time. And I think that is what is prompting people to say, now is the time, right? There's an opening here. There's the linemen are blocking. There's a hole. Let's just run the ball through and score a touchdown. Let's see who's next. We've got Soul Viking says, do not come to the U.S. if you are coming from Cuba, because most likely you won't be a new Democrat. So we don't want you. All right. Good point. We've got Brian Hack is here, says, why are the audits being delayed evidence? Is this to make up evidence, to hide evidence until the narrative is managed, or to discredit the audit after the fact? Good to see you, Brian. I don't know why the audit is being delayed, or why the results are being delayed. I do know that there are some conversations that are taking place about some vote counts, right? So Karen Fan from Arizona, our Senate Majority Leader here, I think, came out and said that the audit totals don't match the reported totals from Maricopa County. Could be a big deal, or it could be not, right? What if the total's like, well, we have 1.3 million votes, and over here we counted 1.3 million and 2 votes. Not consequential. But what if it's 1.1 million versus a 1.3 million? That's a big deal, right? And so before you ever reveal that stuff, you got to be bulletproof on it. Checking, rechecking, multiple independent checks and so on. But I don't really know. I'm working on a bigger project on all of that, and that's going to be a lot of fun. We've got Sharon says, the U.S. government is not asleep at the wheel. They're supporting the commies. I guess that's a good point, right? Sometimes I will attribute malfeasance to just incompetence, and that's not always accurate. I agree with that. We have the last villain says, it's not about bombing Cuba, it's about leverage. Trump wielded American power in a way that made you pay attention. Democrats want to say words like diplomatic solution so they can blame others. Plus, Democrats don't want to trash the new order. They are working to make America into. Yes, so when you have a government that exerts a lot of control, that's sort of an attractive way of operating a country. And so they're not going to undermine one of those structures. Lastly, we've got Three Girlies says, could the Cuban people just walk over to Guantanamo Bay and say, I want asylum? They would be on U.S. territory. That's a good question. I don't think so, right? That's a very highly secure area. I think there are landmines around that place. So probably not a good idea to walk over there, but your point is well taken nonetheless. I think that if there was a welcoming by the administration, they would probably be overwhelmed, right? Down there. If they knew, if they knew where they could step foot essentially on U.S. soil, right? So maybe that's why they are being so forceful and vocal about dissuading them from ever trying to come to the United States. It's just to sort of prevent a surge, which is kind of a good idea. They probably should have tried that at the U.S. southern border before they started changing a bunch of policies. But they're getting better at it. So, all right, great questions. All of those, once again, came over from watchingthewatchers.locals.com, where we have a live chat and a lot of fun happening right now. That one Florida man is here in the chat. Jeremy Matreed is in the house. We got Ryan is in the house and others. And so go and check that out at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. And we appreciate all of your support there. Thanks so much for watching. Before you head out, I want to just remind you that I am a criminal defense lawyer here in Scottsdale, Arizona, where my team and I, we've got a long history of helping good people facing criminal charges to find safety, clarity, and hope in their cases and beyond that in their lives. Our phone number for a free case evaluation is 480-787-0394. You can also find us online at www.rrlawaz.com. We can help with any type of criminal charge in the state of Arizona, things like DUI, drug offenses, misdemeanor offenses. And we can also help with clearing up old case records, like expunging cases or making sure that you can restore your rights so that you can vote again or possess a firearm again or apply for some other federal benefits. We can remove mugshots off the internet. Basically, anytime that you or somebody you know or love is in trouble with the law in the state of Arizona, we have an amazing team of people. We would just love the opportunity to help. And our phone number, of course, 480-787-0394. And if you don't need any legal services, that's a very good thing. But you may be interested in some informational offerings so that you are prepared if you do have to deal with the police. And of course, I want to invite you to head on over to gumroad.com/Robert Gruler. You'll notice here, I've got several different trainings that are available, including the law enforcement interaction training. This is the 1, 2, 3 rule for dealing with the police. It's one rule you need, 2 questions that the police can ask of you, and 3 responses if they ask you a problematic question. So that's available now. You can also get a load at my personal productivity system here called Existence Systems. Fun little course. And then we have here, if you're a lawyer or a legal professional, be sure to check out this program. We are meeting twice every month. Again, all of this over at gumroad.com/Robert Gruler. And if none of that sounds any good to you, well, just go ahead and give us a follow, because I'm working on some other products and some other offerings. And of course, if you have not already done so, want to invite you one more time to head on over to watchingthewatchers.locals.com. It's where you can support the show, and it's where we can connect. We've got monthly Zoom meetings and a lot of other goodies coming up. So I look forward to seeing you there. Thank you so much for watching, and for all of your love and support. I will see you on the next one.